Admiral Thessaara floated in the command chamber of the Coral Crown, her blue-scaled hands gripping the control panel. Through the transparent walls of her ship, she could see the last of her people's fleet. 3 massive city ships drifted in the dark space, their hulls cracked and bleeding atmosphere. Around them, smaller escort vessels limped forward on damaged engines. Behind them, the enemy came like a hungry tide. The Void Swarm had been eating star systems for 6 months now. They were not like other enemies the Corellian Collective had faced before. These creatures were made of living crystal that grew and spread like a disease. They consumed entire planets, turning rock and metal and life into more of themselves. Thessaara had watched her home system die 3 weeks ago. The swarm ships had descended on Coralia Prime like silver locusts. The beautiful coral cities beneath the ocean had crumbled in minutes. 6 billion of her people had lived there. Now there was only empty space and floating crystal debris. "Admiral," called her communications officer, Relin. His voice trembled with exhaustion. "The swarm ships are gaining on us. Our engines cannot go faster." Thessaara looked at the tactical display. Red dots moved across the screen like drops of blood in water. Each dot was a swarm vessel the size of a small moon. Their harvest ships reached out with crystal tentacles, grabbing refugee transports and pulling them apart. "How many people do we still carry?" she asked. 47 million across all ships," Relin replied. "The children and elderly are in the deep chambers. They are scared, Admiral." Thessaara closed her eyes. 47 million souls, the last of an entire civilization that had existed for 12,000 years. Her people had been artists and musicians, builders of underwater gardens, singers of the deep currents. They had never wanted to fight anyone. A new alarm sounded. Through the clear walls, Thessaara saw a flash of silver light. One of the escort ships, the Dancing Tide, had been caught by swarm tendrils. The crystal creatures pulled it apart like children tearing paper. The ship's crew sent no distress call. There was no point. "Admiral, the Gentle Current reports engine failure," another officer said. "They are falling behind." Thessaara felt her heart sink. The Gentle Current carried 8 million refugees, families, children who had never seen their home world die. Old ones who remembered the songs of the ancient depths. "Tell them to transfer as many people as they can to emergency pods," she ordered. "We will pick them up." But even as she spoke, she knew it was hopeless. They had no time. The swarm was too close. "Admiral," Relin whispered, "what should we do?" Thessaara looked around her command chamber. Her officers stared at her with large, dark eyes. They were all so young. Too young to die, too young to watch their civilization end. She had tried everything. They had sent messages to every known species in the galaxy. The proud Altarian Empire had closed their borders. The Nexus Federation had offered prayers but no ships. Even the warrior clans of the Mordak had refused to help, saying the swarm was too dangerous. No one wanted to fight the Void Swarm. No one wanted to risk their own people for strangers. "Prepare the archive," Thessaara said quietly. Her officers looked confused. "Admiral?" "The cultural archive. Everything we have saved. All our music, our art, our stories, our history. Prepare it for transmission." Understanding dawned on their faces. The archive was their civilization's memory. Everything the Corellian people had ever created, learned, or loved was stored in quantum crystal matrices. If they were going to die, at least someone might remember them. "But Admiral, who will receive it? No one has answered our calls for help." Thessaara swam to the main communications panel. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. "We will send it into the deep void, into the empty spaces between stars. Maybe someone will find it someday. Maybe they will know that we existed." The archive systems came online. Terabytes of data began flowing into the transmission array. songs that had made her people weep with joy, poems written in the deep trenches of their world, stories of love that crossed the dark spaces between coral cities, art that captured the beauty of sunlight filtering through water. "Include my personal log," Thessara added. "Let them know who we were. Let them know we were not just another species that failed to survive. We were people. We had dreams." The swarm ships grew larger in the viewports. Their crystal hulls gleamed with stolen starlight. Thessara could see the harvest tendrils extending toward her fleet. Soon they would wrap around the city ships and begin the process of consumption. "Transmission ready, Admiral," Relin reported. Thessara took a deep breath. The water in her chambers felt warm and safe. It reminded her of home, of swimming through kelp forests with her sister when they were young, of the sound her mother made when she sang the old songs. "Begin broadcast. All frequencies. Maximum power. This is Admiral Thessara of the Corallian Collective to any who receive this transmission," she spoke into the communications array. Her voice carried through space at the speed of light, reaching toward distant stars. "We are the last of our people. The Void Swarm has taken everything we built, everyone we loved." She paused as another escort ship died behind them. The crystal creatures were so close now she could see individual tendrils reaching through space. "We send you our culture, our memories, our souls," she continued. "Learn from our mistakes. Remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to be more than just survival. Remember that we loved." The transmission array hummed with power. The archive flew into space, carrying with it the essence of an entire civilization. "To any who hear this," Thessara said, her voice growing softer, "remember us. Remember that we tried." The communication cut off. Around her, the crew worked quietly at their stations. No one spoke. They all knew this was the end. Through the transparent walls, Thessara watched the first swarm tendrils wrap around the coral crown's hull. The crystal creatures began their work, turning the ship's beautiful coral structures into more of themselves. She closed her eyes and thought of home, of deep blue waters and songs that echoed through underwater caverns, of a people who had chosen beauty over violence, art over conquest, and somewhere in the dark between stars, their final message traveled toward unknown worlds, carrying the hope that someone, somewhere, would remember. The Void Swarm consumed the last ships of the Corallian Collective, but their words still flew through space, searching for someone who might care that an entire civilization had just died. In the deep void, the message traveled on, and someone was listening. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching the stars through reinforced titanium glass. Out here in the galactic rim, space looked different, darker. The stars were scattered and cold, separated by vast distances that would take years to cross even at maximum jump speed. This was the edge of everything. The place where most civilized species feared to go. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," called Lieutenant Chen from the communication station. He was young, barely 25, but his hands were already scarred from hull repairs under fire. "Long-range sensors caught a transmission. It's alien." Vasquez turned away from the viewport. Her ship was a monster of human engineering, built for the kind of space that killed other species. The hull was 3 meters thick, designed to survive impacts from asteroid debris and enemy fire. The crew quarters could seal completely if the atmosphere was compromised. Every system had 3 backups. Most alien species called ships like this insane. Humans called them practical. "Put it through," Vasquez ordered. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking in a language the ship's computers had never heard before. But the translation systems were good. They had to be. Out here where first contact could mean the difference between trade and war. This is Admiral Thesara of the Corellian Collective to any who received this transmission. We are the last of our people. The Void Swarm has taken everything we built, everyone we loved. Vasquez listened to the message in silence. Around her, the bridge crew stopped their work. The voice on the transmission was calm, but there was something in it that made everyone pay attention. Sadness, acceptance, the sound of someone saying goodbye. We send you our culture, our memories, our souls. Learn from our mistakes. Remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to be more than just survival. Remember that we loved. The message ended with a simple request. To any who hear this, remember us. Remember that we tried. Then silence. Analysis, Vasquez said after a moment. Transmission origin is approximately 4 light years from our current position, reported Ensign Torres from the sensor station. She was built like most humans who worked in deep space. Compact, efficient, with cybernetic implants that let her interface directly with the ship's systems. The signal is less than 2 hours old. 2 hours, Vasquez repeated. She did the math in her head. Whatever had happened to these people, it was happening right now. Captain, Chen said quietly, the data package attached to the transmission is massive. Looks like their entire cultural database. Art, music, literature, historical records. Everything. Commander Sarah Mitchell, Vasquez's first officer, pulled up the tactical analysis on her screen. Mitchell was a veteran of the Titan War, where humans had fought off an invasion by silicon-based life forms in the outer system. Half her face was cybernetic, replaced after a boarding action went wrong. The Void Swarm, Mitchell said. I've heard rumors about them from Nexus traders, crystal creatures that eat entire systems. Most species won't even talk about them. Because they're scared, added Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez from the engineering station. He was missing his left arm below the elbow, lost during a reactor containment breach. The prosthetic he wore was better than the original. Heard the Altarians lost 3 patrol fleets trying to fight them. Just disappeared. Vasquez pulled up the star charts on the main display. The transmission's point of origin showed up as a red dot in the vast darkness. According to the Galactic database, that system belonged to something called the Corellian Collective. Peaceful species. Ocean dwellers. No military to speak of. How far is 4 light years in jump time? She asked. 18 hours if we push the engines hard, Torres replied. But Captain, we're supposed to be patrolling the Hadean Nebula. Command won't like us abandoning our assigned route. Vasquez looked around her bridge. The Prometheus Unbound was the lead ship of Battle Group 7, one of 12 human fleets assigned to patrol the galaxy's most dangerous regions. Places where radiation storms could fry electronics, where gravitational anomalies could crush ships like tin cans, where things lived that shouldn't exist according to most species' understanding of physics. Earth had made humans into something unique in the galaxy. Their home planet was what other species politely called a death world. Between the weather that could change from freezing to boiling in hours, the tectonic activity that regularly reshaped continents, and the evolution that had produced predators designed to hunt intelligent prey, Earth had created a species that thrived on danger. Most civilized species avoided humans. They were too aggressive, too willing to take risks that seemed insane. Human traders would fly through asteroid fields for fun. Human explorers would land on planets that were actively volcanic. Human soldiers would fight hand-to-hand against enemies that other species needed powered armor just to survive being near. But there was something else about humans that made them different. Something that Command had learned during the early expansion wars. Humans couldn't ignore a distress call. Ma'am, Chen said hesitantly, there's something else. The transmission included coordinates and tactical data. Looks like this Admiral Thesara was hoping someone would come help. but the message sounds like a goodbye, Mitchell pointed out. Like they don't expect to survive. Vasquez walked to her command chair. It was built like everything else on the ship. Sturdy, practical, designed to keep working even if the rest of the bridge was compromised. The leather was worn smooth by years of use. She thought about the voice on the transmission, Admiral Thessara, someone who had watched her entire civilization die and still took the time to send their culture to strangers, hoping someone would remember. "Orders, Captain?" Mitchell asked. Vasquez looked at the star chart again. 4 light years, 18 hours at maximum jump speed. Whatever was happening to the Corellians, it would be over long before they arrived. But maybe, just maybe, someone was still alive. "Signal the fleet," she said. "All ships prepare for emergency jump. Set course for the transmission coordinates." "Captain," Torres said carefully, "regulations state we need authorization from Sector Command before abandoning patrol routes. And the Void Swarm, most species consider them too dangerous to engage." Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Most species didn't evolve on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We've received a distress call from an alien species called the Corellians. They're under attack by something called the Void Swarm. We're going to help." She paused, thinking about the regulations, about the proper procedures, about the safe, sensible thing to do. "I know this isn't our assigned mission. I know Command didn't authorize this. I know most of you signed up to patrol empty space and keep the shipping lanes clear. But someone sent a message into the void asking for help. And as long as I'm captain of this ship, no one dies alone on my watch." Around the bridge, her crew began preparing for jump. No one questioned the order. No one suggested they should wait for authorization, because they were human, and humans answered distress calls. "Jump in 15 minutes, Vasquez announced. "All ships." In the depths of space, 12 human warships prepared to cross the void. Their destination was a dying star system where an alien species made its last stand against creatures that consumed worlds. Most civilized species would have called it suicide. Humans called it Tuesday. Admiral Thessara had stopped believing in miracles hours ago. The coral crown shuddered as another swarm tendril wrapped around its hull. Through the transparent walls of her command chamber, she could see the crystal creatures working their way through the ship's outer sections. The Corellian fleet was dying by pieces. The gentle current had been consumed an hour ago. The deep harbor was nothing but floating debris. Only the coral crown remained, and it wouldn't last much longer. "Admiral," Rellan called weakly from his station. "The swarm ships are preparing for final harvest. They're moving their core vessels into position." Thessara nodded. She had seen this before at other systems. The swarm would surround their prey completely, then begin the conversion process. Every atom of matter would be transformed into more crystal creatures. Even the space dust would not escape. "How many people do we still have alive?" she asked. 3 million, Admiral. They're in the deep chambers." Rellan's voice cracked. "The children are asking when they can go home." Thessara closed her eyes. 3 million. The last of the Corellian people. Huddled in the deepest parts of their ship while monsters tore it apart around them. Then something impossible appeared on her sensors. "Admiral!" The voice came from Yeslara at the tactical station. "I'm reading jump signatures." "Swarm reinforcements?" Thessara asked tiredly. "No, Admiral. These are different. Unknown configuration. 12 vessels approaching at high speed." Thessara looked at her display screen. 12 new contacts had appeared on the edge of the system. Their energy signatures were unlike anything she had ever seen. Too hot to be normal engines. Too controlled to be natural phenomena. "Can you identify them?" "Negative, Admiral. but they're moving through the nebula field like it doesn't exist. No ship should be able to navigate in those energy storms. Thessara felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. It was a dangerous feeling. Hope could kill you faster than despair if you weren't careful. But as she watched the unknown ships approach, she couldn't help herself. The swarm had noticed the new arrivals, too. Several of their harvest ships turned away from the coral crown to investigate. The crystal creatures were not stupid. They knew when something might be a threat. "Admiral, incoming transmission," Relin said suddenly. "It's from the unknown ships." "Put it through." The speakers crackled for a moment. Then a voice came through speaking perfect Karelian. But there was something strange about the accent. Something that made it sound like the speaker had learned their language from recordings. "Karelian Fleet, this is the TNV Prometheus Unbound. We received your transmission. Prepare for immediate combat assistance. Hold the line. Humanity is here." Silence fell over the command chamber. Thessara stared at the communication panel. "Did they say humanity?" Yeslara whispered. Thessara knew that name. Every species in the galaxy knew that name. Humanity. The Deathworlders. The species that had crawled out of the most hostile planet anyone had ever discovered and somehow learned to laugh at death. Most civilized species avoided humans. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Their home world was so violent that just living there should have been impossible. But humans not only survived Earth, they thrived on it. "Admiral, the human ships are moving into attack formation," reported the tactical officer. "They're by the depths, Admiral. Look at how they move." On the display screen, the 12 human ships flowed through space like hunters. They moved in patterns that seemed to ignore physics. Sharp turns that should have crushed their crews. Accelerations that should have torn their ships apart. The first human ship, a massive vessel covered in weapon ports and armor plating, sailed directly into the middle of the swarm formation. Its guns opened fire with a sound that traveled through space itself. Bright lances of energy tore through crystal hulls like they were made of ice. "Impossible," breathed Yeslara. "Those are kinetic weapons. Who uses kinetic weapons in space combat?" A second human ship, smaller and faster, danced around a swarm harvester 3 times its size. The human vessel fired what looked like primitive chemical rockets at the crystal creature. When they hit, they didn't just explode. They kept burning, eating through the swarm's hull like acid. "Admiral!" Relin called out, excitement creeping into his voice for the first time in days. "The swarm ships are pulling back from us. They're moving to engage the humans." Thessara watched in amazement as the battle unfolded. The human ships fought like nothing she had ever seen. They took damage that would disable any other vessel and kept fighting. One ship had its entire front section blown away, but it continued firing its rear guns while its crew worked to seal the breach. The largest human ship, the one that had first spoken to them, rammed directly into a swarm mothership. Instead of being destroyed, it punched through the crystal creature's hull and emerged on the other side, its armor scarred but intact. "Those ships," Yeslara said in wonder. "They're built for war, not just combat, actual war, like they expect to take massive damage and keep fighting." A new voice came over the communications system. Female, calm despite the battle raging around her. "Admiral Thessara, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Prometheus Unbound. Are you able to move your remaining vessels?" Thessara activated her own communication system with trembling hands. "Captain Vasquez, our engines are damaged. We cannot achieve escape velocity." "Copy that, Admiral. We'll handle the swarm. You focus on keeping your people alive. Human engineering crews are standing by to assist with repairs if you need them." "Captain, there are so many swarm ships. Your fleet cannot possibly—" "Admiral," Vasquez interrupted, and Thessara could hear the smile in her voice. You've never seen humans fight before, have you? As if to prove her point, another human ship, this one barely half the size of a Corallian escort, charged directly at a swarm harvester 10 times its mass. Instead of using its weapons, the human ship deployed some kind of boarding pods, small craft that looked like metal spears, shot across the space between ships and punched through the crystal creature's hull. They're boarding a swarm ship, Yeslara said in disbelief. They're actually boarding it. But swarm ships are filled with toxic atmosphere, Relan protested. The radiation levels alone would kill any organic life in minutes. On the tactical display, Thessara watched the human boarding pods disappear into the swarm vessel. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the entire harvester began to shake. Internal explosions lit up its crystal structure like a light show. The swarm ship stopped moving. Its weapons went silent. Then it simply fell apart, breaking into millions of pieces that drifted away into space. "How?" Thessara whispered. "Admiral," came Captain Vasquez's voice again. "We're detecting more swarm vessels approaching from the outer system. Big ones. We're going to need your people to stay in your deep chambers for a while. This might get a little rough." A little rough. As if a battle that would decide the fate of an entire species was just a minor inconvenience. Thessara looked around her command chamber. Her crew was staring at the display screens with expressions of pure amazement. Outside, impossible ships crewed by impossible people were fighting impossible odds. And winning. For the first time in months, Admiral Thessara allowed herself to believe that her people might actually survive. That somewhere in the vast galaxy, there existed beings crazy enough to fly into certain death just because someone had asked for help. She thought about the message she had sent into the void, a desperate plea that she had never expected anyone to hear, let alone answer. But humans had heard, and humans had come. "All stations," she ordered, her voice strong again for the first time in weeks. "Assist the human fleet however possible. Our people are going to live." On the display screen, 12 human warships continued their impossible dance with death, fighting creatures that consumed worlds. And slowly, steadily, they began to win. Commander Jake Morrison felt the deck shake beneath his feet as another swarm weapon hit the blood and thunder. The heavy cruiser's hull groaned under the impact, but the ship held together. Human ships were built tough. "Damage report," he called out over the noise of battle. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Chief Martinez from Damage Control. "Atmosphere sealed, no casualties." Morrison nodded. Deck 7 had been evacuated before the fight started. Humans learned early that space combat meant accepting that parts of your ship were going to get destroyed. The trick was making sure those parts didn't contain anything important. Through the reinforced windows of the bridge, Morrison could see the swarm mothership they were attacking. It was massive, at least 5 kilometers long and shaped like a twisted crystal flower. Smaller swarm ships crawled over its surface like insects. "Sir?" called Lieutenant Kim from Weapons Control. "Our main guns aren't doing much damage to that thing's hull, it's too thick." Morrison studied the tactical display. The swarm mothership was heading directly for the Corallian refugee ship. If it reached them, millions of innocent people would die. He couldn't let that happen. "Change of plans," Morrison announced. "Helm, set ramming course for the mothership." The bridge crew looked at him. Morrison saw the familiar expression on their faces. The moment when people realized their captain was about to do something that most species would consider insane. "Sir," the helmsman said carefully, "our ship mass is approximately 30,000 tons. The mothership is estimated at over 5 million tons." "I can do math, Lieutenant," Morrison replied. "But mass isn't everything. Physics is about energy transfer. We're going to hit that thing at maximum velocity while our reactor is overloading." Understanding dawned on the crew's faces. It wasn't a ramming attack. It was a controlled explosion with a very large delivery system. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going to ram the swarm mothership. All personnel prepare for emergency evacuation. Engineering, begin reactor overload sequence. We have approximately 4 minutes before things get exciting." On another ship, the announcement might have caused panic. On a human vessel, the crew simply got to work. They had trained for this scenario. Every human ship practiced what command called terminal engagement protocols, ways to keep fighting even when your ship was doomed. "Sir," reported the communication officer, "Captain Vasquez is requesting our status." Morrison activated his personal comm unit. "Elena, this is Jake. We're going to take out the big one, but we'll need pickup for my crew." "Understood," came Vasquez's voice. "Rescue pods are standing by. Try not to get yourself killed, Jake. I still owe you money from that poker game." Morrison smiled. "Trust Elena to worry about gambling debts in the middle of a battle. If I die, consider it forgiven." "Like hell! You're buying drinks when this is over." The Blood and Thunder accelerated toward the swarm mothership. Around them, the battle raged as other human ships engaged smaller swarm vessels. Morrison watched a destroyer called the Angry Wasp spin between 3 enemy ships, its guns firing in all directions. Half its hull was gone, but it kept fighting. 2 minutes to impact," announced the helmsman. "Emergency pods launching now," reported Chief Martinez. "All non-essential personnel evacuated." Morrison looked around his bridge. Only the essential crew remained. The people needed to guide the ship to its target and make sure the reactor exploded at exactly the right moment. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." "Save the speeches for when we're dead," Morrison replied. "We might actually survive this." Through the windows, the swarm mothership grew larger and larger. Morrison could see individual crystal formations on its hull. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like frozen lightning given form and consciousness. 1 minute to impact, reactor overload in 30 seconds. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system one last time. "All remaining crew, this is your captain. We're about to show these crystal bastards what humans do to things that threaten innocent people. It's been an honor." The Blood and Thunder struck the swarm mothership at approximately 12% of light speed. The kinetic impact alone would have destroyed a normal vessel, but the ship's reactor had been deliberately overloaded, turning the entire cruiser into a fusion bomb that delivered its payload directly into the enemy's hull. The explosion lit up space like a new sun. Admiral Thessara watched from the coral crown as the human ship disappeared in a ball of white fire. The swarm mothership, which had seemed invincible just moments before, broke apart like a glass sculpture struck by a hammer. "By the depths," whispered Rellan. "They destroyed it. They actually destroyed it." But Thessara wasn't watching the explosion anymore. She was watching the rescue operation. Even as the Blood and Thunder died, other human ships were already moving to collect the emergency pods. They had planned for this. They had accepted that one of their vessels would be destroyed, and they had prepared to save its crew. "Admiral," called Lara from the tactical station, "the human ship Iron Storm has a hull breach. They're venting atmosphere." On the display screen, Thessara could see the human vessel. A swarm weapon had torn a hole through its side. Atmosphere streamed out like blood from a wound. Any civilized species would have immediately withdrawn to make emergency repairs. Instead, the human crew sealed the damaged sections and kept fighting. Thessara watched in amazement as figures in spacesuits floated outside the ship, welding patches onto the hull while the battle raged around them. "They're making repairs during combat," Lara said in disbelief. "In vacuum, under fire." "Admiral, incoming transmission from the human ship," Rellan reported. "Put it through." A new voice came over the speakers. Male, casual, speaking between what sounded like hammer blows. "Corellian vessel, this is Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez on the Iron Storm. We're taking some damage over here, but nothing we can't handle. How are you folks doing?" Thessara stared at the communication panel. The human was making casual conversation while hanging in open space, repairing his ship under fire from weapons that could vaporize him. We are well," she managed. "Do you require assistance?" "Nah, we're good. Just need to replace this hull section, and we'll be back in business. Might want to cover your sensors for a minute. We're about to use some big fireworks." Before Thessara could ask what he meant, the Iron Storm launched a salvo of missiles at a nearby swarm harvester. But these weren't normal missiles. They seemed to burrow into the crystal creature's hull before exploding from the inside. "Thermal charges!" Rodriguez's voice explained cheerfully. "They burn through crystal like butter. We developed them after fighting some rock creatures in the Vega system. Turns out the principles are the same." Thessara realized that humans had fought things like the Swarm before. They had experience with enemies that seemed impossible to defeat. They had developed weapons and tactics specifically for creatures that other species thought were invincible. "Admiral," Relin called excitedly, "the Swarm ships are retreating. They're actually pulling back." On the tactical display, Thessara could see it happening. The crystal creatures that had seemed unstoppable were disengaging from combat. They were fleeing from a force less than a quarter their size. "Captain Vasquez," Thessara called over the communication system. "The swarm is withdrawing. You've done it. You've saved us." "Not yet, Admiral," came Vasquez's reply. "This is just the first wave. There will be more. But don't worry. We're not going anywhere. Humanity doesn't abandon people who need help." Thessara felt tears forming in her large eyes. Around her, the surviving crew of the Coral Crown wept openly. They had watched their entire civilization die. They had sent a desperate message into the void, hoping someone might remember them. Instead, someone had come to save them. "Captain Vasquez," Thessara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Why? Why did you come? You don't know us. We have nothing to offer you." There was a pause before Vasquez answered. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Admiral, where I come from, we have a saying. No one fights alone. Your message reached us, and we couldn't just ignore it. Besides," and Thessara could hear the smile in her voice, "nobody kills civilizations on our patrol route without filing the proper paperwork first." Despite everything, Thessara found herself laughing. These humans, these impossible people from their impossible world, had traveled across space to fight an enemy they had never seen to save people they had never met. And they made jokes about it. Around them, the human fleet began forming a protective screen around the damaged Corellian vessel. They would stay, Thessara realized. They would guard her people until they were safe, because that's what humans did. They answered the call when others could not. 3 days after the battle, Admiral Thessara floated through the corridors of the Prometheus Unbound. The human ship was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were thick metal, scarred from countless battles. Emergency equipment was mounted at regular intervals. Everything was built to survive damage and keep working. But it was the walls themselves that captured her attention. They were covered with small metal plates, each one engraved with names and dates. Thousands of them. "Memorial plaques," explained Captain Vasquez, swimming beside her through the corridor. Humans could move through water-filled spaces almost as well as Corellians, Thessara had learned. Another adaptation from their impossible world. "Every crew member we've lost, we don't forget." Thessara studied the nearest plaque. "Corporal Maria Santos died saving the Arcturus colony from solar flares." She looked at another. "Lieutenant Commander Chen Wu killed defending refugees from the crystal spiders of Proxima 7. "How many battles have you fought?" she asked. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Too many, but each one mattered. Each one saved people who couldn't save themselves. They reached the ship's medical bay, where Corellian survivors were being treated by human doctors. Thessara watched a medic carefully bandaging the injured fin of a young Corellian while speaking in perfectly pronounced clicks and whistles, her people's language of affection used with children. "Your people learned our language," Thessara observed. "We had 18 hours during the jump," Vasquez replied. "Our linguists are good at their job. They have to be. We meet a lot of species who need help, and you can't help people if you can't talk to them." In the corner of the medical bay, Thessara saw something that made her heart skip. A human child, maybe 10 years old, was playing with a group of young Corellians. They were sharing art, the human child drawing pictures with colored pencils while the Corellians shaped water into beautiful sculptures. "You brought children," Thessara said, "into a battle zone." Vasquez followed her gaze. "That's Emma Rodriguez. Her father is Chief Rodriguez, the one you talked to during the repairs. Her mother died in the Vega system fighting those rock creatures I mentioned. We don't have anywhere safe to leave our kids, so they come with us." "But the danger—" "Admiral," Vasquez interrupted gently. "There is no safe place for humans in this galaxy. Earth taught us that. So we teach our children what we learned: how to survive, how to help others survive, and how to keep hope alive even when everything seems hopeless." They moved to the observation deck, where Thessara could see the rest of the human fleet. 7 ships remained from the original 12. The others had been destroyed or too damaged to continue. Human engineering crews worked around the clock to repair what could be fixed and strip useful parts from what couldn't. "I need to ask you something," Thessara said. "Why do you do this? Your species could be merchants, explorers, scientists. You could build beautiful things and live peaceful lives. Instead, you patrol the most dangerous parts of space, fighting monsters that other species won't even acknowledge exist." Vasquez was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Do you know what Earth was like, Admiral? Our world tried to kill us every day. Storms that could level cities, earthquakes that could split continents, ice ages that lasted thousands of years, plagues that killed half our population. Predators that hunted us for food." She gestured toward the stars visible through the observation window. "Most species developed on worlds that were relatively safe. Stable weather, peaceful evolution, predictable environments. They learned to create beauty and harmony because they could afford to. But Earth never gave us that luxury. So you became warriors." "We became survivors," Vasquez corrected. "And survivors have a rule. You don't let others die if you can prevent it. Because today it's them, but tomorrow it might be you. And when your turn comes, you want someone to answer your call for help." Thessara thought about the Corellian colonies that had been consumed by the swarm. Billions of people who had sent distress calls that no one answered. The Altarians had been too proud, the Nexus Federation too cautious. The warrior clans too afraid. Only humans had come. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication system. "This is Lieutenant Chen. We have incoming ships, multiple contacts, approaching from Galactic Core." Vasquez activated her personal communicator. "Identification? Unknown configuration, Captain. But they're broadcasting human identification codes." Thessara followed Vasquez to the bridge, where the crew was tracking the new arrivals. On the main display screen, dozens of ships appeared at the edge of the system. They were clearly human vessels, but different from the ones that had fought the swarm. These ships were larger, newer, built for long-range operations rather than combat. "Fleet Command," Vasquez explained. "Reinforcements." "But how did they know to come?" "Because we sent a message after the battle. When humans find something like the Void Swarm, something that threatens entire civilizations, we don't keep it secret. We call for help. The lead ship of the new fleet was enormous, more than twice the size of the Prometheus Unbound. Its hull was painted with symbols that Thessara didn't recognize, but somehow she understood their meaning. Protection, hope, the promise that no one would face extinction alone. "This is Admiral Chen of the TNV Indomitable," came a voice over the communication system. "Captain Vasquez, what's your status?" "Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Corellian refugees are safe. The swarm has been driven off for now." "Good work. We're bringing colony ships, construction vessels, and a full battle fleet. The Corellian people will have new homes, and this region will be under permanent human protection." Thessara stared at the display screen. "Colony ships? Your people need somewhere to live," Vasquez explained. "The swarm consumed your home system, but there are other worlds, good worlds with oceans and coral reefs. We'll help you rebuild." "But why? What do you gain from this?" Vasquez smiled. "We gain new friends, new songs, new art, new ways of seeing the universe. Your people have created beautiful things, Admiral. The galaxy is better with that beauty in it." Over the following weeks, Thessara watched the human rescue operation unfold. Colony ships arrived carrying everything needed to establish new settlements. Construction vessels began building orbital habitats around suitable worlds. Medical ships provided care for the Corellian survivors. But it was the small gestures that meant the most. Human children shared their toys with Corellian youngsters. Human artists collaborated with Corellian musicians to create new forms of beauty. Human engineers worked with Corellian craftspeople to build homes that felt like the underwater cities they had lost. On the day the first new Corellian settlement was established, Thessara stood with Captain Vasquez on the observation deck of the Prometheus Unbound. Below them, human and Corellian workers labored together to create something neither species could have built alone. "I have one more question," Thessara said. "What happens when the swarm comes back? They will come back eventually." Vasquez pointed to the edge of the system, where human patrol ships maintained a constant watch. "Then we'll be ready. The swarm consumed your civilization because you were alone. You're not alone anymore. And if something threatens humanity, who will come to save you?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Hopefully, by then, there will be others who learned from our example. Others who understand that the galaxy is better when people help each other instead of looking the other way." Thessara understood. Humans weren't just rescuing species like the Corellians. They were teaching them, showing them that there was another way to live in a dangerous galaxy, that civilizations could choose to protect each other instead of hiding behind walls. "There's something I need to tell you," Thessara said. "Our original message, the one you received, it wasn't just a distress call. We also transmitted our entire cultural database. Everything we had created, learned, and loved. We wanted someone to remember us if we died." "I know," Vasquez replied. "We received it all. Every song, every poem, every work of art." "What will you do with it?" "Share it," Vasquez said simply, "with every species we meet. Your civilization didn't die, Admiral. It just found new voices to carry its songs." In the distance, a young Corellian child laughed as a human child taught her to draw with colored pencils. Near them, their parents worked together to plan a new city beneath an alien ocean. The Void Swarm had consumed the Corellian homeworlds, but they had not consumed the Corellian people. Those people lived on, protected by beings from a death world who had learned that survival meant more than just staying alive. It meant making sure others could stay alive too. And in the depths of space, human patrol ships continued their endless watch, waiting for the next distress call from someone who needed help. Because humans always answered. Always.